You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, Spike, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody, that music means it is Friday. It is noon central. Do you know what the heck is happening to volatility? Well, let's find out together. Yes, it's time for Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com. Don't forget the. Otherwise, I don't know what the heck you're going to. But if you head to our site, you get all sorts of fun alerts and content and data, all the earnings vol information you can sink your teeth into, and a whole bunch more. Of course, links to every show we've ever done for the past 15 plus years now. Man, that's a lot of shows. There is no way you can go to our website and say, I'm bored. There's not enough content here. There's enough content to keep you busy for months, if not years. So head on over there, enjoy. If you want to go above and beyond, join us live in the shows, get access to our giveaways, get access to the pro Q&As, the options oddities, which is morphing into rapidly becoming one of my favorite and also, for me, one of the most expensive shows on the network. Then you know where to go. Theoptionsinsider.com/secret club is the place to go to learn more. And of course, however you listen live after the fact, we do appreciate if you like what you hear on the on-demand side, then keep rating and reviewing. And of course, as always, send in those questions, those comments, because these are crazy vol times. I get it. We all have questions about these markets, so send them in. We will work through them here together on the program. And joining me today in the MIAX hot seat to help me work through all this volatility madness that is afoot once again, we are joined by Volman and also his mild-mannered, alter ego, the Rock Lobster, Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI. So, Mr. Rock Lobster, welcome back to the program. Which of you is which? Which is the superhero? Which is the mild-mannered alter ego?
Well, I mean, I would say I'm the superhero. I mean, come on. Maybe Volman is a superhero, but he's a stickman, So there's only so much a stickman can do in this big, broad, bold world.
Well, he has man in his name, so he kind of has the jump on being the superhero.
Yes.
Superman, Batman, Aquaman. These are all superhero names. Andrew I can't recall a superhero named Andrew off the top of my head. Andrew Man. There we go. See, now we've done it. We've created our newest superhero. And on that bit of nonsense, let's keep on rolling. It is time for the volatility review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the week that was and indeed still is, from a vol trading and trending and analysis and unusual activity and all sorts of perspectives. And at the top of the show, Mr. Volman, before we go any further, I have one question for you to start the show. We did it a few weeks ago, and now, we're back above that 25 level in VIX and Spikes land. So my question for you, sir, is do we need a return of the logins? I'll leave it up to you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, we do. We're definitely there. I know you'll be deplatformed or whatever, but yeah, we're definitely in the danger zone.
All right, well, I'll have to see if I can get that going then while you do your vol review. First, let me set the table here before I invite the wrath of the copyright gods here. And yeah, coming into Showtime, listeners, once again, the old Ukraine spookage, the Ukraine two-step, keeping the markets on their toes out there as we're coming into Showtime, listeners. Pretty much most of the major indices at 1% to the dark side, if not more. The Dow is the laggard, only off about, I say only, 0.8% over there. S&P off a little bit north of 1%. NASDAQ, as it is wont to do, leading the charge to the downside again, off 1.6%. That means all of our vol friends are popping this week, listeners. We've got spikes coming into Showtime just a tick under 30. 29 3/4 when we kicked off the show, listeners. That puts it up 4 1/4 points from where it was last week. VIX cash 29.20. That's up about 4 3/4 points as well, pretty much from where it was this time last week. VVIX, so the vol of vol, getting frothy again, up to about a 137.5. That's up 6 points from where it was this time last show. And of course, the other side of the vol of vol, the Viking, aka the V Spikes. Check it out for yourselves, listeners. VSPKE is where to look for it on your platforms. Is at about a 171.5. when we kicked off the show. That's up about 3 points from this time last week. And again, that's kind of slotted towards the upper portion of the range. It topped out at about almost 206. That was on December 3rd of last year, right around the time of the big Omicron onset into the marketplace, and hit a low of 128 on November 4th. So we're obviously well north of the lows and within spitting distance of the highs out there. So vol is getting frothy again. And, Mr. Rock Lobster, I almost sent you a message earlier this week. So I was looking when vol was continuing to move to the downside this earlier in this week. I thought, what's the one way I could really bounce this vol? I know, maybe I'll start thinking about buying some UVXY puts. And I almost messaged you right before I did that. I said, hey, maybe you may want to load up to the upside, because in the past, this has been a good moment for vol to bounce whenever I start thinking about some downside in UVXY. And I wish I had done that for you, Mr. Rock Lobster, because you'd be sitting on your own private island right now, sir.
Well, the private island would be nice, of course. I would have to move from my rock to an island, but that's okay. And your prognostication is handy, but I think as our viewers are probably wondering, they're like, what? All this vol is going up and the market is weak, and I mean, I would tell people, you know what though, even though you say that, it is not easy to close your long volatility. Like I have, I'm long some call spreads in VIX and VXX.
Wait, we're joined by a special guest, Mr. Rock Lobster. Copyright gods be damned. The Loggins has returned to the program, sir.
Yes! Because you know what time it is?
It's the danger zone, baby.
Zone.
We're back. We're back. You can blame Putin. We were facing off against the Russians in Top Gun. It seems appropriate to have a little Loggins back on the show. What do you think?
no, I think that's always the,
You were lost in the logins. You were getting too into it.
I was. You know what I was? I was Tom Cruise in the cockpit, giving the
You were flipping over and giving the finger to the MiGs. Yes,
Syrian,
that was you.
Or whoever it was that they had the incursion with in the Mediterranean Sea.
All right, don't let the logins distract you. Let it just fill you with the vol fervor, sir. What is lighting up your tape in this mad week of volatility? This
what I would say, like, continued creep of the curve higher. So when let's see, how old am I? I'm old, right? So I'm an old person. I actually started market making when I first began was about 2 months prior to when we invaded in the Gulf War I. So that was 1991, I think. And that whole run up to the war, right, was there's illiquidity. And that's, I think, for people like right now, that like the biggest problem now is really illiquidity. Nobody really wants to do anything because they don't know what Putin's going to do. And, Putin's probably like, oh, this is so easy. I'm just going to keep selling E-minis and keep saying there's incursions and like.
He can't easily finance his war effort through this, right? Just rattle some sabers, bam. Some puts.
Saying, and I'm sure Goldman Sachs has a huge account for him, because they have, they take care of their clients. So, anyway, I do not know that, but it sounds like that's probably what the deal is.
So you're gonna get a call from Goldman's lawyers after the show.
Has a Goldman proprietary trading account. Anyway, and I'm sure they charge him plenty for it as well. So free market, it's a free market, free world, or except if you live in Russia or China. But be that as it may. So what you have is illiquidity. So all these, I've gone into, I remember wars and incursions and all this kind of stuff while we're doing this for 30 years. And it's always the same, right? You have illiquidity going into whatever it is. And it could last a very long time. Don't know, right? You don't know how long it will last. Could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be 3 weeks. You got old Anthony Blinken going out there next week, I guess, to visit the Russians. I guess the Olympic Games are coming to a close, and then everybody's worried about that. Now the games are over, so Putin's going to beat up on the Ukrainians. The reasons are still not clear why he might want to beat up on those nice Ukrainians, but apparently with its massive size and vast resources, they fear the Ukraine is some kind of threat, probably to their natural gas pipelines or something. But anyway, and I think the big reason is Putin doesn't want Ukraine in NATO. So he's making us think about it. Anyway, for whatever the reasons are, it doesn't matter, because the market right now is as soft as a cream puff. So there's it's like pushing your finger in Jell-O. It's just going to keep going, and it's going to keep going, and keep going. And does it necessarily spike the vol super high? Not necessarily. But you're already at near a 30 vol today. So VIX is 29.54. The market's down 1% right now. Yeah, the S&P 500 is down 1%. It probably feels a lot worse for a lot of stocks. So you're going to get that continual press lower, vol inching higher, and it's going to keep going, and it's not going to stop. And it's going to stop when there's resolution. So I remember these trading periods. This could go on for months. It could go on for another month. There's no reason, Putin's paying his army. He could sit him at the border till the cows come home. It's not going to change anything for him. Plus, at this point with energy prices, he's probably paid for whatever incursion he might think he's going to get. So I would just say, everybody, you keep that in mind. It's reasonable. So I don't think anything's going to change that way until it does. And then when it does, it'll be like, whoa, right? Either we go in, they go in and they make a huge mess, and that causes a really big mess. It will cause a big mess in oil markets, nat gas markets, I would assume. Gold will spike. Treasury bonds would spike, all that kind of stuff. So now, if the opposite happens, he's like, okay, I got what I want, and I'm satisfied, and I'm pulling my troops, and the West does some concession. Who knows? Who knows how it will work out? And then everything goes the other way. So, but right now, if you want to think of it, it's like you're pulling a bow back, you're pulling it back, and you're going to just keep pulling it back until it gets let's go. So I just expect VIX to crawl up continually, the SPY to continually ratchet down. The market was already a little weak because of the Fed and everything else, so this is just another thing thrown on the fire. How low can we go? Who knows? Could the SPX be 4,000 next week? Sure, why not? It's only 10% from where we are. That's not too hard at this point, or actually it's less than that. I'm going to say it's 5% from where we are. Where are we now, SPX? It's hard for me to tell because every time I look, it's even lower. 43.34. Yeah, so we easily can be 4,000 next week. Again, just ratcheting down. So as far as I think that's about, is vol necessarily a trade? I think the easiest vol trade is probably butterflies, call butterflies and stuff like that in the short term. Cost very little money. They give you a big upside kick. It's funny because one of our trading products yesterday, I don't know when you wanted to buy your calls, if it was Thursday, but it's buying upside call butterflies and UVXY. They're super cheap, 60 cents for buying an in-the-money call fly, and they've already doubled in value. So you've got those are the things that there are interesting things to do still, but you have to be you also have to be wary of, okay, I'm going to ride the ball up a little bit, take my money, and then wait, you can't really be super greedy thinking you're going to have a massive ball pop. Now, all of those things could come to pass, by the way. We could have a massive ball pop. We could have a massive ball event. VIX could go to 45, for a day if the Russians decide to really make a mess of things. So, who knows? It depends how many shorty mini futures Putin has. So, and I think that's what we got. And I think as a we're in the danger zone. Again, remember last Thursday we were just at a 20. Hard to believe a week ago, right? But it was an easy 20, and it's like, okay, everything's cool, and it's not so cool. So I think that's what we have. And as far as from an equity point of view, I think you have to look around for bargains. Intel is trading at the same level it was at the bottom of the pandemic. And because they just said, hey, we don't see margin growth and everything looks terrible and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of stocks, if you're interested in being an investor, that, are interesting. I think short-term is still a tough trade. So that's kind of the lay of the land that I see it right now.
Our listeners are getting into the logins. They've already tweeted out some clips of Top Gun, of Tom Cruise buzzing the tower and all the fun. I haven't seen that movie in forever. Now that we have the Super Bowl ads for the new one coming, I might have to go revisit it. I don't think I've ever watched it with my little guy. That's kind of one of the epitome of the 80s movies. You got a handful that are up there, and Top Gun is certainly up there. So might be a good time to revisit that over the weekend. What do you think, Mr. Rock Lobster?
It is. I think there might be some racy elements in there.
That's true.
Your
gets a little sultry. Gets a little sultry at times.
Yes.
Because, 80s movies, even kids' movies, they swore. They didn't care. It's just a different time completely. You watch some of those now, you're like, wow, this is the kids' movie? Oh, okay. They're killing each other. They're swearing up a storm. Like, this is G? Good times, but I digress. Let's keep on rolling out here into the land of vol. And as you might expect, given the fact that we are back in the danger zone, that Kenny has once again joined us on the show, listeners, that vol's getting a little juicy. The futures getting a little bit backward. As we kicked off the show, obviously Feb has now rolled off the board since last. We've got that March future up a little over 3 points, about 3.1 points since last week. So that's nothing to sneeze at. Of course, if we reran the numbers right now, I'm sure they'd be even higher. April was up about 2 points. That front portion of the curve getting juicy, getting backward, showing us that at least for the time being, at least for right now, not looking like a sleepy holiday weekend. Mr. Rock Lobster, anything catching your eye out there in the ever juicy, ever frothy VIX futures term structures?
Well, there is a little frothiness, and what it is it's it's just a flatness. So generally, like I was just saying, that the flatter the curve is, the more I think it is primed for VIX to move. And right now you have let me just get my chart up here. Yeah, you got, okay, so 9-day VIX is 28.67. VIX itself is 29.25. March is 28.50. April's 27.40. And then just 27 for May. So you have you got a little backwardation. But the 9-day vol, and that's probably, I think maybe the weekend is probably artificially pressing that down a little bit. But you have well, here's another thing. When was the last time you saw a flat curve when VIX was 29? Normally you have flatness closer to 2021. So this is actually pretty high. This is where you need Russell Rhodes to do some kind of deep dive in the data. But I don't, usually VIX is not flat this high. It's so weird now how comfortable how normal it feels for VIX to be at 29, but not much is really going on. The SPX is down 1%, but that's, again, like I said, it's the reason because the rubber band has been continually stretched for days. But having this flat a curve this high is weird. And it has to go with I believe, the unknown quantity of we're facing on the geopolitical side. So you have it's flattish but backward. But the 9-day vol, again, I think because we have a 3-day weekend, is a little lower. So again, flat curve usually means VIX is going to move a lot. So really, if Putin says I'm pulling out or whatever, and I'm happy, if that happens on this weekend, we'll open at a 24 easily. And SPX will probably zip up, maybe 75, 100 points, something like that. So you just keep that in mind. Or it's I'm going in, and we're going to start, whatever, people dying and all kinds of bad stuff that happen, and then we're 40. So just the flat curve means VIX moves a lot. How much SPX moves, I would figure at least, the daily moves we have now. So I don't think that's I think that's a fairly good, that's kind of how I see what the curve's doing now. That's my interpretation.
That's your interpolation. We just had the once in future and present Dr. VIX on Twifo yesterday. I should have gotten some nuggets for him for vol views today as well. Interesting stuff. Speaking of future stuff, I see Luigi. Now I see what you're asking about. You were asking about what that quote means for the 10-year Treasury. Okay, I didn't know what you were asking yesterday. All right, that's a great question to dive into on Twifo. In fact, you should have asked it about a week ago. We had the great rate specialist. We could have done a deep dive into that. But that's a good question. I think we can get into that on a future Twifo a little bit, what those actual quotes mean out there. Because you're right, the rates are kind of a little bit counterintuitive for people who are first coming to grips with them. We're used to quoting things and just straight up strikes and everything else like that, and you can understand that intuitively. Things in the yield curve get a little bit funkier, a little bit wonkier. So that might be a good conversation for an upcoming Twifo. So good question there, Mr. Luigi, as we keep diving into the realm of volatility here today. Let's go out to the vol options. Well, let's start in Spikes Land. Remember, listeners, last week they had that funky four-way. Let's see, it was the April. It was the Feb 26-22 put spread against the 30-40 vertical. I do believe they were using the put spread to finance the upside, if I do recall correctly. So if they had it on through the end of this week, it might have looked a little bit better. It has expired now. I don't think they took it off. I think it just expired. So now we're waiting for the new positioning, the big positioning out there in Spikes options right now. It was like a March 14-17 vertical, nothing huge out there. So we're still waiting for the new four-way multi-leg spread trader. That seems to be what people like to use Spikes for these days, to come in on the next leg. Are they going to start coming in? The 1x2 in the past, sell 1x2, that That trade was pretty popular out there in spikes for a while. Is that going to start rearing its head again in this environment? Get for a blast to the upside? We shall see. Speaking of blasting, you might think VIX would be blasting off right now from a volume perspective. It's certainly taken off from a price and level perspective, but not so much. Got about 196,000 contracts on the tape right now. Again, that's not bad. Back when just a few weeks ago, listeners, we were hovering around 400,000 in the ADV, so that would have been half a day's worth of volume. But a day like today, we're facing, global geopolitical meltdown perhaps over the weekend. Vols popping, markets are selling off. You might think you'd see a little bit more paper on the tape. But right now, only 196,000 contracts on the tape. That ADV, though, as I mentioned, has continued to tick up ever since we were about to break through the 400K level to the dark side. It has just turned around aggressively. We're back up to those levels I was talking about. We got up to around, I think, 730 or so the last time. Then we came crashing right back down to almost back into the 300s again. And now back up to this show, 751. So we're above that level now, up 55,000 contracts just since this time last week. So a lot of paper going on and going up out there in VIX land. Before we break it all down, let's look at the top positions. What is open? What are people up to out in VIX options right now? And it may interest you to know, we have seen some evolution. For a while there, calls were kind of hard to find. They were 90-10, and then last week they were 80-20 in the top 10, pretty much all puts all the time. This week, as you might expect, given what we're seeing out there, a little bit of a flipping of the script. We're now moving back calls in a product that is normally call dominated. Calls are finally starting to come back into favor. We now have 60-40 puts over calls in the top 10. So puts are still dominant, but nowhere near as much as they were even a couple of weeks ago. We have actually 4 call positions in the top 10 in VIX land. If you've been listening to the show, you can probably guess at least one of them. But number 10, it cost you 114,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VIX right now. That gets you to the May 75s. This 75 strike has kind of been all the rage of late. I want to get your thoughts on this in a minute, Mr. Rock Lobster. This kind of 1x5, they were doing it in October. I think they rolled out to March a little bit as well. Maybe they obviously have rolled out to maybe May as well. So this 75 1x5 is intriguing. Obviously, the 5-leg is coming on our radar here for the top 10. Number 9, 114,000 as well. The March 24 puts. Number 8, $1.26 of the May 35s. That'll tell you kind of where we're hanging out now from a VIX perspective when the 35s also come on the radar as well. In fact, all of our call strikes are, shall we say, interesting. Number 7, 126,000 of the March 22 puts. Number 6, 128,000 of the March 20 puts. Number 5, our third of 4 calls. It is 130,000 of the June 70s. Back up to those fun strikes. Number 4, 132,000 of the June 19 puts. Number 3, also in June, 134,000 of the June 16 puts. Number 2, the aforementioned OX 75s, 150,000 of those bad boys. And they're just a tick below the number 1 spot. Again, it's kind of a weak number 1 this week. Only 150,000 contracts. That's more usually our number 10 spot than it is the number 1 spot. But c'est la vie, that's where we find ourselves this week. It is the June 18 puts, 150,000 contracts. Obviously, some contracts have rolled off the board with expiration, but that is still a pretty low level for VIX, which again kind of shows you that there's a lot of paper going up right now. It's active. The ADV is high. It's just kind of spread far and wide. There's no one strike that is just dominating the mind share the way for a while there it was 20 puts or whatever the case may be, and everyone and their mother was just piling into those. It's not that case right now. Today, like we said, not super active. About 200,000 contracts on the tape. The most active contract today are going back to those 20 puts. That's kind of interesting. The March 20 puts, 17,000 of those. You would have expected maybe something more to the upside today. Followed by number 2, 13,500 of the March 22 puts. Number 3, 13,000 of the April 22 puts. So we got a nice little put strip going there today, which is interesting. Maybe people getting the heck out of Dodge on those. Number 4, 10,000 of the May 85s, 85. So 70s and 75s. Not optimistic enough for your blood. I present to you the May 85s, listeners. And rounding out the top 5 today, on a somewhat light day, only 8,000 of the May 21 puts. So 4 of the top 5 trades today, all puts. That's kind of surprising. Yesterday, a little bit more paper on the tape, 701,000 contracts to be precise. The big dog yesterday, almost 100,000, 97,000 of the March 22 puts. So folks just flocking back in to that VIX put strip there. Number 2, 47,000 of the April 26 call. So there we got a call, a pretty beefy call there, a pretty active call there in the top 5. Number 3, back to the puts, 34,000 exactly of the March 20 puts. Number 4, 32, almost 33,000 of the March 24 puts. And rounding out the top 5 yesterday, 28, almost 29,000 of the March 23 puts. So again, kind of a put strip going up there yesterday. Wednesday, also a pretty active day, 650,000 contracts on the tape. The big dog on Wednesday, 49, almost 50,000 of the May 25. So there, that's a more reasonable call strike. You see all these all the time, 65s, 70s, 75s, 85s. We don't see the 20s and the 25s lighting it up as often as you might think. But on Wednesday we did, to the tune of nearly 50,000 of the May 25s. Wednesday, all calls in the top 5. Number 2, 47, almost 48,000 of the April 27s. Number 3, 40,000 of the March 30s. Number 4, 29, almost 30,000 of the March 40s. And rounding out the top 5 on Wednesday, 29,000 of the March 35. So there we go. Some actually relevant call strikes for a change. Tuesday and Monday were wrestling with each other for the big dog day. Monday took it, but just slightly. Tuesday, a pretty active day. 907,000 contracts on the tape on Monday. The big dog on Monday, back to that 1x5. This time in May, the May 75s, 90,000 of those things traded on Tuesday. My goodness. Followed by number 2, 66,000 of the Feb 30s. Number 3, 38,000 of the Feb 25 puts. Number 4, 37,000 as well of the Feb 28 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on a pretty active day, 36, almost 37,000 of the Feb 24 puts. And wearing the crown this week is Monday, just by a smidge, 2,000 contracts. 909,000 contracts going up on Monday. The big dog on Monday, 58, almost 59,000 of the March 75s. Get used to that strike, listeners. We're going to be hearing it a lot. Number 2, 50,000 of the Ox 75s. Number 3, 48, almost 49,000 of the April 27s. Number 4, 40,000 of the March 35 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on the most active day of the week, Monday, 32,000 of the April 24 puts. I haven't seen a lot of April in our top 5s over the course of this week, which is also kind of interesting. Mr. Rock Lobster, a lot to unpack here. What caught your eye this week out there in the land of VIX options? And then after that, I must get your thoughts on this funky 1x5, how they're just extending it now, it seems, from starts off in March, and then they're going all the way out to, October and beyond. What are your thoughts on this funky 1x5, sir?
That was actually the trade that did catch our eye the most when we were looking at that this week. So when they bought, was it the 75-35? It was something like that. Let me see. And I'm trying to see, and it looked like they wanted it when they put it up. It was like for even money or a slight credit, I believe. Let's take a look here. I'm just looking at the volume. So yes, that was actually from a VIX trade point of view. That's the thing that we saw beginning of the week, where it looks like somebody wanted a giant volatility play. At first, we thought it might be buy 1, sell the 5, which I can't even imagine what the margin, the firm margin for that is. And I guess I think for somebody that's trading VIX, they can, because the big VIX firms could absorb that into a book of options because they're probably always long, however many contracts they are in VIX or whatever. But yeah, I thought that was quite a trade. So it looked like just a massive. I actually probably have it still in my. Let me look here in my trade log. See, because that went up. Yes, it was the October 35.75 1x5 for a credit or even money, and now it's going for. I thought they traded it for around even. So. What's weird is, as far as I'm looking at from a Delta point of view, it's saying they haven't made money on it, even though they did it 1x5. So I have a hard time believing that with all the ups, with how much they bought. But it's like one of those things where if the vol's kind of creeping up, it doesn't do very well, and they really need a real jump in vol to make money. So you have one of those things where the 35s kind of have a more like a slightly harder delta than the 75s, and you get kind of that skew creep, where the volatility on your 75s is not really holding up well enough relative to the 35s on a small move. But if you had a big move, then it will do better because the vol explodes and then you have the leverage of the 5x1. So that trade we saw go up, Mark and we looked at it, I think, on Tuesday in a big money flow. So it was an interesting one to keep an eye on. What's weird, if you notice, Mark, is you haven't seen like the 50 cent type purchase, right?
I think he's on his own private island. He's just retired. Either he made so much on that trade, or the credit book he had against it got wiped out so badly. One way or the other, he's done.
Well, you would think though, because he just took the cash on those calls, right? I mean, they were like $50 in the money.
He waited for a while, and then he finally hit the bid. Yeah.
So and then the Fed helped the credit markets, right? They're like, okay, we're gonna make sure there's liquidity in the credit markets for people, right? So you would think, and then 8 months later, 6 months later, 4 months later, the credit markets had settled down tremendously. So if he sold that hedge out, and then the rest of his credit book came back, he had a pretty good year.
Yeah, he's living unhedged out there for a little bit with his credit book. But yeah, he seems like he's a guy who can kind of twist in the wind a little bit. And if he did both ways, yeah, you're right. He's probably done.
Yes, yeah, he's doing okay. So anyway, so on that score, I think that worked. It felt like that worked pretty well. But you're not. I'm not seeing that kind of paper for VIX at this level. So I'm not seeing that kind of straight buy, that straight kind of buy action. So that makes me think that again, like I said, I think this. To paraphrase the Fed, our lift in volatility is transitory.
If they came out and said something like that, they said, "Oh, the backwardation in VIX futures is transitory," I'm all behind them. But they've been saying this nonsense about inflation for a freaking year, and nobody's been believing it but them.
Yeah, and the government keeps spending more money. Like, okay, we're going to make this all better. Don't worry, we're going to keep spending money, and I'm sure it'll get better. I'm sure. But anyway, again, of course, that's a policy thing that I'm not qualified to judge. But I found that funny, to say the least, when it comes to all that. So anyway, so as far as that trade goes, so I'm not seeing that kind of go-go bullishness for VIX. The volatility trade, I could see that's something you could unwind, I guess, down the road. And it was a huge one, 50,000 by 10,000 is a pretty big trade. I think it went up several times. So that's so as far as from a volume point of view, that was the biggest trade I've noticed. And right now, volatility just keeps expanding in VIX, right? So when you're buying puts right now, it's like, oh, right, and I think. One of my favorite phrases for my students is backwardation is where VIX puts and VXX puts and UVXY puts just go to die, right? Because you have this like daily grind higher. They just crush the puts. They crush puts. I do own some, but not near as many as I normally do. But just waiting, basically waiting for things to kind of settle out. But like the March 15 put right now is $1.10 in VIX. I think that's not a terrible price for where we are. Now, granted, who knows how long the backwardation lasts that we have. Like I said, Putin could wag the dog for a month or more. So you have that. The duration risk is definitely real in any put buying you do right now, unless you buy some like VXX puts out in January of 2023, something like that. And that's the volume. So you would think you would see like more upside action, and I think that's what your volume numbers said. There's not as much upside volume action as you would think, given the potential right now.
Well, don't worry, Mr. Rocklobster. If you were worried about tensions potentially easing there on the Ukrainian border, Putin has decided to personally oversee enormous nuclear drills this weekend amid all the tension. So he's going to go there personally, and that's going to calm everything down. Massive nuclear drills. That's an interesting choice. Now we are getting flashbacks to the old Cold War days. Now maybe I do need to watch Top Gun, or better yet, Red Dawn. Oh, that's if there's an 80s movie in a nutshell, that is Red Dawn. Oh, it starts off with the Mongol forces, and next thing you know, the paratroopers are descending on the school.
Oh, exactly.
There's no subtlety in that movie at all, which makes it fantastic. The kid's carving the notches in the gun. The guy says, "Oh, that hate's going to eat you up, kid." He says, "It keeps me warm," and he keeps carving the notches in the gun. Yep. I need to watch that movie. I'm getting excited now just thinking about that. But that's a conversation.
And it was the Cubans. Remember the Cubans?
Yeah, Cubans and the Russians. Because yeah, interesting stuff out there. 80s movies. There's no real iconic music for Red Dawn, otherwise we could play that on the show. But I digress as we keep rolling. Let's see what else is rocking out there. I said VIX is not really maybe rocking the way you might think. Well, VXX and UVXY said, hey, take a break, kid. Hold my beer. We're going to show you how it's done. Because coming into the start of this segment, VXX, over 300,000 contracts on the tape, 301,000. This is, I forgot how many shows in a row now, but this is multiple shows now we've had where VXX has been doing more paper than VIX options at this point in the show, which is, again, surprising. The ADV would tell you otherwise. The ADV is up 22,000, but it's still only 375. It is pretty much half of what's going on out there in VIX right now. And yet still, a lot of our shows we're seeing VXX doing. Maybe VXX is more morning-based paper. I don't know what it is, but VXX, when we kicked off the segment, about 23.5, up about 1.5 points. That's when we kicked off the show. Let's see if it has rallied a little bit since then. Yeah, almost 24 now, so it's caught up a little more. They're up nearly 2 points from where it was this time last week. Let's do a quick top 10 out here. Number 10, 22,000 of the March 20 puts. By the way, the ADV, like I said, 375, up 22,000 from this time last week, so getting more frothy out there as well. Number 9, 224,000 of the Feb 16 puts. Those are going out today. Number 8, 23,000 of the March 17 puts. If you're wondering, 9-10, 9-1 puts over calls in the top 10 out there in VXX. So no upside love in the VXX this week. Number 7 is our first call, the Feb 60s with 23,000. Number 6, 24,400 of the March 18 puts. Number 5, 30K of the March 16 puts. Number 4, 30,000 as well of the Feb 20s. All the rest of this is Feb, all going out today, Feb 20 puts. Number 3, 31,000 of the Feb 18 puts. Number 2, 44,000 of the Feb 17 puts. And number 1, an even 50K of the Feb 19 puts. All that paper really seems to be going the way of the dodo listener, which shows how heartbreaking VXX can be. You can be right the entire cycle and you get a little bit of a Putin pop at the end of the week on expiration, and all those put strikes we just talked about are pretty much worthless. And given how VXX paper plays out, I'm going to just reasonably intuit that 90% of that paper plus was buying. So it looks like we have a lot of heartbreak out here again this cycle in VXX. These products are reliable, but then once in a while they are not. And when they're not, you got to have a plan for that. Today, the most active, 17,500 of the Feb 23 puts. Number 2, about 16,000 of the Feb 24 calls. Getting some call action today. Number 3, 14,600 of the Feb 23 halves. Also calls. And number 4, 14,000 of the Feb 23s. And rounding out the top 5 today, 11,000 of the Feb 26s. So 4 out of 5 of the top 10 today, top 5, I should say, in VXX are calls. That should tell you something. Mr. Rock Lobster, anything catching your eye out there in the land of VXX this week, aside from the fact that, judging by this OI, a lot of people are going to be sad today at close, sir?
Yeah, I think there was high hopes for maybe 18 or 19. Like I said last week, all those those puts are relatively inexpensive. People piled in, and then the raft of sadness came, and Putin screwed up everybody's party. So, actually, I'm surprised. I don't have any VXX puts expiring worthless this week, although I have some 19s for next week. That could very well do that. But VXX was 19 last Thursday. So again, like if the like I said, if the worries subside, that's kind of the number that I would see. it just does not feel like we're going to see that today. So at least from that point of view, that's kind of, I believe, what we got going on. So as far as volume goes, like right now, I haven't seen any standout volume. I know people in our chat room, they're more interested in because this is where all these puts come under such pressure when a vol does this, and they just smear them, and the vol kind of ends up in the upside, and they just crush the puts. So early into these kind of weird vol events, puts get really hurt. So everybody be mindful of that. But I hadn't seen any unusual paper. Although you look at it, even today, what's going on or what's really active, there is some. I guess the number one trade is still a VIX puts looking for some kind of action today, or some VXX puts looking for some sort of action today. I don't know how much you're going to get today, but anyway, I think it's just very. It's like I said, it's a wait and see. So vol kind of creeps up a little bit, and that's it. There's not a lot of excitement there.
Let's see if there's any excitement out there in the land of UVXY listeners. And judging by the OI out here, it's a similar tale of heartbreak. Right now, UVXY a little bit north of, it was at 17 when we kicked off the show, about 17 and a quarter. Right now, it puts it up about 2 3/4 points from where it was this time last week. That ADV also getting pretty frothy. It's up to about 250,000 contracts. Now, that's nothing to sneeze at for UVXY. That's up 21,000 from this time last week. And already today, we got 212,000 on the tape. So both VXX and UVXY, I can't remember the last time we had this, both of them outpacing VIX options as of right now. That is kind of weird. We have not seen that. Usually it's VXX. It's a higher volume product, obviously, but UVXY kicking in there as well. That's surprising. Let's do a quick top 5 in here in UVXY land because it's smaller positions. Number 5, 13,000 of, this is all Feb pretty much expiring today, unless I tell you otherwise. 13,000 of the Feb 15 puts. Number 4, 13,000 as well of the Feb 12 puts. I'm sorry for both of you. Number 3, about 15,000 of the Feb 14 half puts. Also my condolences. Number 2, 16,600 of the March 70s. By the way, 70-30 puts over calls in the top 10 for UVXY. And number 1 out there, Feb 14 puts, about 17,500. So 4 of the top 5 positions here in UVXY are going to go the way of the dodo. Again, you were looking really good this week until you weren't. I was starting to look at some of the downside in UVXY. It seemed like it was coming in aggressively. We were well below certainly the 15 strike. Yeah, then not so much. Yeah, interesting times out here. The worm can turn. We've seen this many times. Usually you see it with Jan expiration. That's where a lot of people tend to pile into these products. They like to do the 1 year, longer term type puts. And those, we've seen those come with a lot of heartbreak as well, where we were so close and then something happens in January. We all know January of late has been a crazy month. Something happens to conspire there in the last week or two to wipe out all of that open interest. And we're seeing that. Looks like, again, at least this month here in UVXY. The top trades today, Feb 17 calls. That should tell you something. 13,300 of those in UVXY, followed by 12,500 of the Feb 16 puts. All this going away today, listeners. Number 3, 9,300 of the Feb 16 half puts. Number 4, 9,000 of the Feb 17 puts. And number 5, 8,100 of the Feb 18 calls. So 2 out of the top 5 today, listeners, calls in UVXY. That alone should catch your interest. Mr. Rock Lobster, anything catching your eye in UVXY outside of the fact that sounds like there's going to be a lot of broken hearts out there as well, sir?
Yeah. I did find that the UVXY 70 calls, the fact that was a top position is that's an interesting That's
been that way for a while. I first started noticing this back in September. Someone discovered there's a lot of meat in the upside in UVXY, and they've just been harvesting it to high heaven ever since.
I was trying to look at when I did the theoretical sheet on what it takes UVXY to get up there. I think they look at the chart last year of what UVXY went to. What was it? What was the split adjusted price? It was pretty high. Let me see here. It's kind of fun to revisit the split adjusted prices. Yeah, so the effective price during the pandemic was So even last year it was 110. So UVXY split adjusted here, like with the split. Top of the pandemic was $1,300. So people see that and they're like, whoa, okay, I'll buy the 70s. But now that we've done the split, it's going to be a lot harder for it to get back up there. Because prior to that liftoff, VXX split adjusted price was about 110. So prior to liftoff, from 110 to 1,000. Listen, it was still a 10x return, right? And I know some people that made wild money on that, which is fantastic. But if you're going to buy those now, you would, the vol of it you need to make the 70s pay is. Doesn't mean it can't happen. It just generally happens only once every 10 years, statistically at least.
I think a lot of the upside paper in UVXY has been selling. I'm looking at right now, like January 26th was a big day for those March 70s. And it looks like they sold blocks of them for $1.40, $1.83. So you get a surprising amount of juice for those. So that gets back to what you were saying. They price in juice in case that craziness comes to pass, right? And someone is deciding to harvest a lot of that. Right.
I think that a lot of that is you wait till it's a little bit more exciting or there's juice to sell. You wait for the event to kind of happen and then come in and sell it, which is what I think, people depend on to some degree. So,
$1.40 for the March 70s. That ain't nothing.
Yeah, no, that's real money when it's, when it's $40, $50, $60 out of the money. It's like, that's a real thing.
If you're wondering, it's a 273 vol. They price some juice into that upside call wing. How juicy that wing can get on occasion out here. Let's look really quickly before we get to some of your crystal ball and everything else. Earnings fun. We had a bunch of it this week. Listener, you can check out the website for all the latest updated earnings move results, earnings season, and earnings trades reports. Big ones popping off this week. We had Palantir and NVDA yesterday. Palantir was at $14 going into their announcement. They're pricing in 15%, listeners. They delivered 11.8%. Let's see if that has held course, if that sell-off has continued out there. 1098. So, yeah, they have sold off a lot since another 6.5% today. Palantir looking low out there, given the fact that, they were at $30 about a year ago or so. So $10. Yeah, some of these pandemic darlings have, shall we say, come under some heat. So, again, if you held it throughout the rest of the week, listeners, you got that 15% back, but you had to wait and you had to sweat a little bit for it. NVIDIA, 265 is where they were going into their announcement. They opened up after their earnings at 245, so 20 handles, and they still underperformed. They were pricing in 9%, and that move was about a 7.5%. Of course, if you wait a few days in this market, something crazy will happen. Now they're down to 230, another 10 handles below that. So yes, they have outdistanced their straddle now, but that's not what we're measuring in these reports. We're measuring kind of the initial amount of juice that they're pricing in and how much that comes out once the balloon pops. Let's go to Walmart really quickly, 17th before the bell. 135.5 was where they were trading. They're pricing in 4.1%. They delivered initially 2.3%, and now looking at it, actually they were at 136.63 after their announcement. They're at 137.76, so they actually rallied more since then. So they actually, if you waited a bit, they actually are about break even with their straddle out there. Let's see if the season is break even. We're pretty darn close, listeners. Updated number is 97% for the season right now. That's the closest we've been in some time. Week 2 is the only real laggard there, 72%. Every other week has been north of 100%. This week we are hovering at 101%. So outperformance every week except for week 2. Can we overcome it to make a green season? We shall find out, listeners, as the worm keeps turning. Speaking of that worm, crazy earnings trades going up. Aegis, they bought a calendar out there. Palantir, they also bought a calendar. Walmart, they also bought a calendar. A whole bunch of other ones here. BAX, GPC, a bunch of tickers here with a bunch buying straddles and some of those. Selling, they actually sold a straddle and bought a calendar in Palantir. So 2 earnings trades there for you. So go check those out. It's just, at the very least, it's interesting food for thought. Why is that triggering for them? Why does that seem interesting? What could you do with that if you had that on? It's a good little thought exercise for you out there. And we have some names still popping off this week. We had a Roku. They were not looking good. They were pricing in, let's see, 23.37. Let's see. They were going into their announcement. They were 161.5. Oh, they're down a whopping $37 today. Go figure. No one's buying the set-top boxes anymore. So, yeah, that one looking rough. I heard DraftKings also kind of screwed the pooch, as they like to say. Spending, go figure, too much money on marketing versus how many accounts they're opening. You see a DraftKings commercial just about everywhere you go these days. They were at $23 going into the announcement. They were pricing in $270. That was pretty rich. That was almost double their past movements of $140. And they are right now $17.70, off 19.5% just today. So, yeah, these last couple of names are dramatic outperformances here from an overall earnings perspective. You want more of that, listeners? There's a whole bunch more. We got names popping off next week. We got Home Depot. We've got Lowe's. We've got Alibaba. We got Beyond Meat. Coinbase is going to be a big one out there. A whole bunch of names still to come, listeners. So stay tuned. We have all the reports for them over there at the website and a whole bunch more. Meanwhile, we've got to keep on going, listeners. We've been gassing on all this logins. Makes us excited here on the show. But it's time to get difficult. It's time to get dangerous. It is time for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody. Last week, I was feeling a little bit more vol, and the meatball was feeling a lot more vol. And he was kind of being half tongue-in-cheek, I think, when he prognosticated his $29.99. But he's not looking that. He's almost within a point on Spikes. Spikes right now, $28.93. So he's not within our margin of victory, obviously much better. About 28.75 or so on VIX. So I'm about a 0.20 away on VIX and about 0.40 or so, 0.38 away on Spikes. He's a little bit closer on Spikes, so I'll give him the winner chicken dinner this week, even though really no one wins because we're not within our very strict, very demanding 1/10 of a point margin of victory. But still, both of us were feeling more froth, but right kind of splitting the uprights between the two of us, which is kind of interesting. But I don't think either of us really felt that this vol was going to go away anytime soon, at least not by the end of showtime. So Mr. Rock Lobster, I apologize. That means the field is wide open. We have a lot of room to play here as we are joined by our final bit of music here. All right, Mr. Rock Lobster, that final bit of music means we need a prognostication from you for what vol level we're looking at for this time next week. And then if folks want to hit you up, they want to reach out to you, do some vol learning over there in the land of the pit, where should they go? What should they do?
This is the hard part of the prognostication because it's going to be either $5 higher or $5 lower.
Yeah. So maybe we'll put an outside one. What if the shooting starts this weekend? And what also if the tanks roll back this weekend? Where are we opening on Tuesday, right? Crazy town.
Exactly. Yeah.
10 handle wide difference easy, maybe more.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you 100%. So what are we going to do an up and down?
Give us your number, and then if you want to do like a scale of where we open, if things mitigate and if things get worse, you can go for it too.
Right. So I don't think, to be honest, I don't think the situation is really going to improve. It's going to be more like the same. So I would guess we're probably right around here. Like, let's say maybe the vol softens a little bit, but I'd still think, let's say we're going to say 27, right? However, if the tanks roll in, we will be like we could see a 40. I'll just say 39.99. And if the tanks roll out, I will say 21.99 for Friday.
Did you have a just regular unchanged vol environment, Chris? What was that?
Yeah, I did. With the unchanged vol environment, I'm just going to go with. I'll tell you what, 26.99.
Nice three-way market. By the way, we had looks like Unlimited was somewhat close. He was at 28.31. That's right. That was your Super Bowl pick, I believe, as well. So you did a little better than I did this week. So congratulations. Not quite within the margin of victory. Luigi, no joy there. He was at a 24 and change. Options Queen, a little bit better, 20. Everyone was feeling mid to high 20s. But, none of us had the winner chicken dinner here. Oh, Munster was at a 27, looking a little bit better there. That was the highest we had for some of our other extraneous picks out there. Remember, get your picks in at Options on social media, listeners. Questions at theoptionsinsider.com also works. Hit us up wherever you get the content. Don't leave them on the iTunes, obviously. We won't see them there. Send them in to us so we can see them in a more fast-paced basis. If you want to play along, get your guesses in. Maybe you win some fabulous prizes out here. All right, so we got this time next week. I'm feeling still kind of frothy as well. I was looking around like a 27 and change, but Mr. Meatball went in, or Rocklobster went in there at 26.99. So I'm going to say, I don't want to go too much lower, though. So I think I am still going to say, I kind of like where I am again this week. So I'm going to say 27.55. I don't normally do that, but I kind of like that level. It's a kind of reasonable level given everything that's going on out there right now. And then if the things start popping off this week, I'm going to say we are in a 40 handle. I'm going to say 42.86 for fun when we're coming in. Remember, no show on Monday, listeners, so this is Tuesday numbers. And if all is right with the world, doves of peace fly, 99 red balloons, all that good stuff over the weekend, then yeah, we're coming in. I'm going to say we're below a 20 hand. I'm going to say we're going to be at a 1975. So there we go, listeners. Quite the cavernous wide market. You guys want to jump in on that action, give us your range for given various Ukrainian outcomes over the weekend. Maybe you get some extra fun prizes thrown in there. All sorts of good stuff there. And, of course, Mr. Rocklobster, before we go, and before you join us in about an hour for oddities, again, if folks want to hit you up, learn more, where should they go? What should they do?
Go to optionbit.com memberships. Call Ted, 888-TRADE-01, if you want to learn how to price and trade and create trades. Let your get your juice for free kind of trade, all that kind of stuff. You can learn how to do it at Option Pit. And remember, if you listen to any show on the Option Insider Radio conglomerate, you get 10% off. So tell Ted, say you heard it here. You want to learn how to do this vol thing. You want to learn how to create positions. You want to learn how to backspread, scalp gamma, all that kind of stuff. Go to optionbit.com memberships or 888-TRADE-01, ask for Ted, and say, hey, I listened to the show and I want my 10% off. There you go.
There you go. Check it out, optionpit.com. Oh, unlimited in our chat, 34.25 for this time next week. He's feeling a little bit more juice. We're getting some good prognostications for if the tanks roll and if they don't this weekend as well. Get those in. It's fun. Meanwhile, you know where to go to learn more about all things spikes. MyAxOptions.com/spikes is the place to go. You get all sorts of great data, news releases, historical charts, links to a cool show called Vol Views. What more could you possibly ask for from a vol-oriented destination? Have a great, safe week. If you're in the Secret Club, we'll see you back here in less than an hour for Options Oddities. Otherwise, see you back here next week. Another Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MyAx, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MyAx is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, Spike, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at MyAxOptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.